Have you ever felt like someone's words burned straight through your peace, or their careless actions tore at the edges of your self-control? Maybe it was a cheap insult, a thoughtless gesture, or a petty slight that shouldn't have mattered. But it did. And here's the uncomfortable truth the Stoics would force you to face. The damage wasn't done by them, it was done by you. You handed over the keys to your inner world and let someone else drive it into chaos. Most of us live as if our emotions are at the mercy of everyone around us. What if you stopped giving people that power? What if you could meet every insult, every provocation, every unfair moment with the same stillness as a mountain in the storm? This isn't about ignoring your feelings. It's about mastering them so completely that nothing can pull you off course. If you're ready to reclaim that kind of control, please subscribe. For your own good, let it be a choice to grow stronger, to think deeper, and to live in a way that no one and nothing can shake. 1. Own your reaction. Sometimes it feels like the world is out to test you. You wake up with good intentions, ready to have a smooth day, and then life happens. Maybe it's the barista getting your order wrong after you repeated it twice. Maybe it's a coworker making a sly comment that feels more like a jab than a joke. Or maybe it's a stranger cutting you off in traffic without even a glance in the rearview mirror. In moments like these, the first instinct is often to point fingers. They ruined my mood. They made me angry. But the truth, as hard as it can be to swallow, is that no one can truly make you feel anything without your consent. It's a lesson the Stoics mastered centuries ago. Epictetus put it plainly. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You see, the trigger may be external, but the explosion, if it comes, starts within. Psychology backs this up. Modern cognitive behavioral theory teaches that emotions are shaped less by events themselves and more by our interpretations of them. Two people can experience the exact same event, say being ignored by someone they know, and have completely different emotional responses. One person might spiral into frustration or insecurity, while the other shrugs and moves on. The difference? The story they tell themselves about what just happened. So, how do you actually start taking ownership of your reactions in the chaos of everyday life? First, slow down. When something triggers you, an insult, an inconvenience, a disappointment, pause before you act. This is not easy. Your body will often want to move faster than your mind, your emotions charging ahead like an untamed horse. But even a few seconds of deliberate breathing can interrupt the chain reaction. Think of it like putting a hand on the reins, gently pulling back before the horse bolts. In those seconds, name the feeling. Say to yourself, "I'm feeling angry," or "I'm feeling dismissed." This small act pulls the emotion out of the shadows and puts it in the light, where you can work with it instead of being ruled by it. Second, challenge the story. If a coworker criticizes your work, your first thought might be, "They don't respect me." But is that true? Could it be that they're stressed or simply have a different perspective? By asking questions instead of assuming the worst, you give yourself room to respond more wisely. Aristotle once said, "Anybody can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy." Owning your reaction means you don't let just anyone or anything pull you into an emotional state you didn't consciously choose. Third, practice detachment, not in the sense of not caring, but in the sense of not tying your inner state to outer events. The Stoics often used the metaphor of an archer. Your job is to aim as well as you can, but the moment the arrow leaves your bow, the outcome is out of your control. Wind, distance, and countless other factors will determine where it lands. Life works the same way. You control your aim, your actions, your words, your mindset. You don't control the results. When you really absorb this, you stop reacting as if the universe owes you perfect outcomes. This is the hidden gift in moments that test your patience. They reveal what's still unsettled inside you. If you find yourself overreacting to small slights, ask, why does this bother me so much? What wound is this touching? These moments are mirrors, showing you where you still have work to do, and instead of resenting them, you can start to appreciate them for the self-knowledge they bring. There's also a practical benefit to owning your reaction. You become unpredictable in the best way. People who want to provoke you lose their power when you stop giving them the satisfaction of a predictable emotional explosion. Imagine someone trying to light a fire under you, only to find there's no spark to catch. Of course, this doesn't mean suppressing your emotions. Suppression is just bottled pressure waiting to burst. Owning your reaction means allowing yourself to feel whatever comes up, but deciding how, when, and if you express it. Much of what disturbs us isn't the event itself, but the replay of it in our minds, the way we nurse the wound long after it happened. When you take responsibility for your reactions, you stop feeding the cycle. You acknowledge the feeling, learn from it, and then let it pass like a cloud drifting across the sky. Owning your reaction is one way of making the unconscious conscious. Instead of running on emotional autopilot, you step into the driver's seat, and from there, you can steer toward outcomes that align with your values, rather than being jerked around by fleeting feelings. It's also worth noting that when you take full responsibility for your reactions, your relationships improve. People trust those who can keep their cool under pressure. You become the person others turn to in a crisis, not because you're emotionless, but because you're grounded. Your calm presence becomes a kind of anchor for everyone around you. And in a world that often feels like it's spinning out of control, that's a rare and valuable thing. In the end, owning your reaction is about reclaiming your freedom. If you let every person, every comment, every inconvenience dictate how you feel, you're essentially handing out pieces of your peace to anyone who wants to take them. But when you draw the line and say, I decide how I feel, no one else, you take that power back. You stop living as a victim of circumstance and start living as the author of your own emotional story. So the next time life throws you a curveball or a direct hit, remember the space between what happens and what you do about it. That space is yours. Guard it, use it, and with each choice you make in that space, you'll become stronger, calmer, and more in control of the only thing you ever truly have control over, yourself. 2. Pause before you respond. There's a moment in every heated interaction where the world seems to speed up. Words fly, emotions spike, and your body reacts before your mind catches up. It might be a sharp tone from a coworker, a sarcastic remark from a friend, or a stranger cutting you off in traffic. Instantly, you feel it. Your shoulders tense, your pulse quickens, your thoughts start racing toward a comeback. That's the moment most people lose control. They fire back without thinking, act on impulse, and then spend hours or even days regretting what they said or did. But it's in this exact moment that one of the most powerful skills you can develop comes into play: the ability to pause before you respond. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but don't underestimate it. This single habit can change the way you handle conflict, protect your relationships, and give you a kind of quiet authority that very few people ever master. When you pause before reacting, you're creating space between stimulus and response, a space where wisdom can live. Pausing doesn't mean you're weak or avoiding confrontation. In fact, it's the opposite. It takes strength to hold back when every part of you wants to react. It's easy to be pulled by the current of your emotions. It's far harder to plant your feet and think. Pausing is the act of making your unconscious reactions conscious. It's about catching yourself in the middle of the automatic loop, trigger, reaction, regret, and interrupting it before it runs its course. The beauty of pausing is that it shifts your focus from immediate satisfaction to long-term outcome. When you react instantly, you're usually chasing relief. You want to release that surge of frustration or hurt. But when you pause, you give yourself the chance to respond in a way that aligns with your values and goals. Imagine you're in a tense meeting and a colleague undermines your point. Your instinct might be to snap back, to prove them wrong right there in front of everyone. But what's the real goal? To win the moment, or to maintain credibility and influence in the long run? A pause lets you choose the latter. Pausing in moments of emotional heat is a form of proving yourself, not to others, but to yourself. It's demonstrating that you can face adversity, however small or large, without losing your center. It's telling yourself, I am the one in charge here, not my impulses. That's a kind of inner confidence that can't be faked. Psychology also backs this up. When you're triggered, your brain's amygdala, the emotional center, lights up, flooding your body with stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. This is your fight or flight system preparing you to act fast. The problem is, it bypasses the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational thinking and decision-making. Pausing gives your prefrontal cortex a chance to come online. Even a few deep breaths can lower the emotional temperature enough for reason to catch up with emotion. And that's the practical part. The pause doesn't have to be long. In fact, it often takes less than 10 seconds to make a huge difference. The first step is awareness, catching yourself when you're triggered. The second is to breathe deeply and slowly. Once you've taken that breath, name what you're feeling. This isn't just self-help jargon, it's backed by neuroscience. Studies have shown that labeling emotions, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling hurt, reduces their intensity. It's called affect labeling, and it works because it engages the brain's language centers, which in turn dampen activity in the amygdala. By naming the feeling, you're signaling to your brain, I see what's happening here, and I'm not going to let it run the show. The pause is also a gift to others. In heated moments, people often say things they don't mean, and those words can't be taken back. By pausing, you not only protect yourself, but you prevent unnecessary damage to your relationships. Imagine how many arguments could be avoided if more people simply took a breath before speaking. In some situations, the pause may even lead you to say nothing at all. Silence can be one of the most powerful responses you have. Of course, there will be times when you'll fail. You'll react before thinking, and you'll regret it. That's part of being human. The Stoics weren't perfect either. They saw philosophy as a practice, not a state of perfection. The key is to use those moments as lessons. Afterward, reflect. What was the trigger? What could I have done differently? This kind of reflection turns mistakes into training, making you stronger each time. Over time, pausing before you respond changes how people see you. You become known as the person who doesn't get rattled easily, who thinks before speaking, who chooses words carefully. This reputation has weight. It earns respect. People start to listen more when you do speak, because they know your words aren't coming from a place of impulse. And perhaps most importantly, it changes how you see yourself. You stop being someone who's easily provoked and start becoming someone who can face provocations without losing composure. That's powerful. It's not about suppressing emotions, it's about directing them. As Seneca said, "He who angers you conquers you." The pause ensures you are never conquered by anyone's words or actions. So next time you feel that familiar surge of irritation, frustration, or anger, Remember this: you are not required to respond immediately. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to breathe. You are allowed to decide. In that pause lies not just your self-control, but your freedom. The world will keep throwing its tests at you, but each pause is a reminder you are in charge of how this story goes. 3. Don't expect others to act like you. It's one of the most frustrating feelings in the world. You treat someone with kindness, respect, or loyalty, and when it's their turn to show you the same, they don't. You'd never talk to them the way they just spoke to you. You'd never ignore their messages the way they've ignored yours. You'd never be as careless with their feelings as they've been with yours. And because you know you wouldn't, it feels almost impossible to understand why they would. That's when disappointment sets in, not just with the situation, but with the person. But here's the truth the Stoics would point out without hesitation. You are expecting people to act by your rules, as if your code of conduct is universal. It's not. And the moment you let go of that expectation, you remove a massive source of unnecessary frustration from your life. When someone's behavior upsets you because you'd never do that, it's worth pausing to ask why you're holding on to that comparison in the first place. Is it because you believe your way is the only right way? Or is it because you've tied your sense of safety and fairness to the belief that others will treat you the way you treat them? If it's the latter, you're giving away your peace to something you can never control. The hard reality is that people operate from their own experiences, values, and priorities, not yours. What you see as rude, they might see as normal. What you consider urgent, they might see as trivial. What you call loyalty, they might not even register as a requirement. And when you measure their actions against your internal yardstick, you're comparing two completely different systems. It's like being angry at a dog for not speaking English. It's not going to happen, and it's unreasonable to expect it. Much of the disappointment we feel with others comes from imagined standards we've silently placed on them. We expect friends to remember our birthdays because we always remember theirs. We expect co-workers to stay late to help us because we do it for them. We expect strangers to be considerate in public spaces because we try to be considerate ourselves. And when they don't, we suffer, not because of their action alone, but because we created an unwritten contract they never agreed to sign. Psychology has a term for this: the false consensus effect. It's the tendency to believe that others think, feel, and behave more like us than they actually do. It's comforting to assume we share a common moral compass with the people around us, but it's simply not true. Everyone is shaped by their own upbringing, culture, beliefs, and personal struggles. Two people can live through the exact same event and walk away with completely different lessons. Expecting them to see the world the way you do is like expecting two painters to create the same picture after standing in front of the same landscape. It's never going to happen. When you release the need for others to act like you start living in alignment with one of Epictetus's core teachings. Some things are in our control and others not. How someone behaves, how they speak, how they prioritize, those are not in your control. Your reaction, your boundaries, and your choices, those are. By focusing on your own behavior rather than policing theirs, you keep your power instead of handing it over to constant frustration. Think about how much lighter life becomes when you stop holding people to invisible standards. That friend who constantly cancels plans last minute. You can either keep expecting them to change or accept that this is who they are and choose whether you want them in your life on those terms. The co-worker who always takes credit for team ideas. You can stew about it endlessly or adjust your approach, protect your contributions, and focus on the quality of your work rather than their ego. You don't have to condone their behavior, but you can stop giving it the power to ruin your peace. Aristotle once said, "It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it." The same applies to behavior. You can witness someone's actions without making them a personal betrayal simply because they don't align with your style. When you do, you start interacting with people as they are, not as you think they should be. And that's where real clarity comes in, because you stop trying to bend reality to fit your preferences and start dealing with it as it actually is. When you know yourself, your values, your principles, your boundaries, you don't need other people to mirror them back to you for validation. Their failure to act as you would doesn't threaten your identity. You stand on your own foundation, which means you can meet the unpredictable behavior of others with steadiness instead of shock. It's also worth mentioning that sometimes our standards aren't as universally right as we think they are. They're just personal preferences dressed up as moral truths. For example, you might think it's disrespectful for someone to answer a text hours later, while they might believe it's healthy not to be glued to their phone. You might value punctuality above all else, while someone else values flexibility. Neither is inherently wrong, it's just different. And when we stop assuming our way is the universal way, we free ourselves from endless battles over what's right versus wrong in situations that are really just different. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Adapt yourself to the things among which your lot has been cast, and love sincerely the fellow creatures with whom destiny has ordained that you shall live." In other words, stop trying to mold everyone into your image and start adapting yourself to reality. This doesn't mean accepting toxic behavior or abandoning your values. It means learning to navigate the wide range of human behavior without making it a constant source of pain. When you drop the expectation that others will act like you make room for compassion. You start to see that people's actions are often driven by their struggles, fears, or limitations. The rude cashier might be exhausted from working 2 jobs. The unreliable friend might be overwhelmed by personal issues they haven't shared. The co-worker who seems self-centered might be operating from deep insecurity. This doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it helps you understand it. And understanding is a lot easier to carry than resentment. Letting go of expectations is a form of healing. It stops the cycle where someone's failure to meet your standards leads to anger, which leads to conflict, which leads to more distance between you. Instead, you choose a calmer path, one where you protect your peace first and let people reveal who they are without forcing them into your mold. In practical terms, this means adjusting your approach instead of endlessly wishing people would change. If you know someone is consistently late, don't plan time-sensitive activities with them. If you know a person struggles with commitment, don't rely on them for critical responsibilities. You can accept people as they are and still make decisions that protect your own well-being. This is the Stoic version of trust but verify, acknowledge reality, then act accordingly. The more you practice this, the more resilient you become. Disappointment loses its edge because you stop being surprised by behavior that doesn't match yours. You start each interaction with clear eyes, not rose-colored glasses, and that makes you far harder to shake. As Epictetus reminded us, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. People may not understand why you're so calm when they fall short of your expectations, but that's okay. Your peace is not up for negotiation. Ultimately, not expecting others to act like you is about reclaiming your mental and emotional freedom. You're no longer chained to the exhausting task of trying to control the uncontrollable. You're no longer constantly judging the world for failing to live up to your script. Instead, you become the kind of person who can adapt to any room, any situation, any personality, without losing yourself in the process. That's not just a Stoic skill, that's a life skill, and once you master it, you'll wonder why you ever lived any other way. 4. Let go of the need to be right. There's a certain rush that comes when you feel you're right. It's that quiet but undeniable spark of satisfaction in knowing you have the facts, the logic, and the moral high ground all lined up in your favor. And when someone challenges you, that spark often turns into a flame. You want to prove it, to show them, to make them see things your way. But here's the problem. The more you cling to that need to be right, the more it drains you. You burn energy on arguments that don't really matter. You create tension where there could be connection. And sometimes, even when you win, you walk away feeling more empty than victorious. The Stoics saw this for what it is, not a sign of strength, but a subtle form of weakness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You always own the option of having no opinion." That's not about apathy. It's about choosing where to invest your energy and knowing when silence or agreement is more valuable than proving a point. We live in a world that rewards winning debates, especially in the age of social media, where every disagreement can become a performance. But winning in the eyes of others isn't the same as winning in life. Much of the suffering that comes from arguments is imagined. It's the belief that if you don't defend your point, you'll be seen as weak or wrong. In reality, most disagreements aren't about truth at all. They're about ego, and ego, if left unchecked, will trade your peace for the hollow satisfaction of being right. That's especially true in arguments. The next time you feel that tension rising and the words, "That's not true," forming in your mouth, pause and ask, why is this bothering me so much? Is it because the other person is truly spreading dangerous misinformation, or is it because their disagreement feels like a challenge to your identity? If it's the latter, you're no longer fighting for truth. You're fighting for your ego's comfort. And the cost of that fight is often far greater than whatever point you were trying to prove. The Stoics believed that controlling your own mind was the highest form of power. If someone says something you disagree with, your reaction is where the real battle happens. You can jump in and try to correct them, which often leads to defensiveness and escalation, or you can choose to listen, even if you still disagree, and protect your inner calm. That doesn't mean you let harmful ideas spread unchecked. It means you learn to tell the difference between battles worth fighting and those that are nothing more than noise. This is where humility comes in, and humility is deeply tied to wisdom. Letting go of the need to be right doesn't mean you surrender your intelligence or your beliefs. It means you can hold space for other perspectives without feeling threatened by them. It means you trust yourself enough to know that someone else's opinion, no matter how wrong it may seem, cannot diminish your truth. When you constantly feel the need to prove yourself, you're living in reaction mode. The other person controls the terms of the conversation, and your emotions become tied to their agreement or disagreement. That's giving away power. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In arguments, your enemy is not always the person you're speaking to. It's the mindset of reactivity, of needing to dominate the other side to feel validated. The best revenge on that mindset is refusing to let it dictate your words or actions. From a psychological standpoint, the need to be right often comes from deep insecurity. If you're secure in what you know, you don't feel the constant urge to defend it. You can let someone else be wrong without it shaking your sense of self. The irony is, when you stop trying so hard to prove you're right, people are more likely to listen to you. There's a certain calm authority that comes from speaking only when necessary and doing so without heat. It's the opposite of trying to win. It's about sharing perspective without attachment to whether or not it's accepted. That's why some of the most respected leaders throughout history weren't the loudest in the room. They were the ones who listened the most and spoke with intention. Letting go of the need to be right is also a form of respect for yourself and for others. It acknowledges that the relationship, the peace in the moment, and the preservation of your energy are often more valuable than scoring a rhetorical victory. Seneca wrote, "We should conduct ourselves not as if we ought to live for the body, but as if we could not live without it." In the same way, we should conduct ourselves not as if we ought to live for our arguments, but as if we could live perfectly well without them. In practice, this means learning to recognize when a conversation has shifted from productive to pointless. If you notice the tone changing, voices getting louder, or both sides repeating themselves, it's time to disengage. You can do this gracefully. You can say, "I see we're looking at this differently," or "I understand your point," and leave it at that. These aren't signs of surrender. They're signs that you value your peace more than your pride. Marcus Aurelius also advised, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This is a reminder that integrity matters more than winning. Sometimes when we're desperate to prove our point, we stretch the truth, exaggerate, or make assumptions. But truth doesn't need embellishment, and your integrity isn't worth trading for a fleeting sense of victory. It's important to remember that not every disagreement needs resolution. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. We like closure. We like the feeling of a conversation ending with everyone on the same page. But in reality, some differences are meant to remain. When you embrace this mindset, your world becomes calmer. You start to see arguments for what they often are. Two people defending their perspectives, shaped by lifetimes of experiences that neither can fully share or replicate. You stop trying to rewrite someone's life story in a single conversation. You realize that you can respect someone and still think they're wrong, and you can disagree without creating an enemy. In letting go of the need to be right, you also let go of the emotional exhaustion that comes with constant debating. You reclaim time, energy, and mental space for things that actually matter. You notice you're less tense, more open-minded, and far more resilient when challenges come your way. That's because your peace is no longer tied to someone else's agreement. Epictetus gave perhaps the most fitting reminder: it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. If you're always fighting to be right, you close the door to learning. But if you're willing to release the need to prove yourself, you make space for growth. You might even discover that the other person's perspective, while different from yours, has value you hadn't considered. The choice is always yours: win the argument or keep the peace. And in keeping the peace, you often win something much greater: self-respect, emotional clarity, and stronger relationships. The Stoics didn't avoid conflict out of fear. They avoided it out of wisdom. They knew that life is too short to waste on battles that add nothing to your character. So next time you feel that familiar pull to jump in, to correct, to prove, pause. Ask yourself if this is worth your time, your energy, your inner calm, and if it's not, let it go. Because the truth is, being right is overrated. Being at peace, that's where the real power is. 5. Don't let words define your worth. It's strange how a few words, sometimes even a single sentence, can feel heavier than a stone. Someone makes an offhand remark, maybe it's about your work, your appearance, your choices, and suddenly it's echoing in your head hours, even days later. You replay it over and over, wondering what they meant, wondering if it's true. The human mind is wired to respond to language in a powerful way. We remember praise, but criticism often digs deeper and stays longer. The danger is when we start treating other people's opinions as if they're carved into stone, as if they're the ultimate truth about who we are. But the Stoics would warn us, Words have no power over you unless you give them power. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." In the same way, everything people choose to say about you reflects something about their own lens, their beliefs, their values, their insecurities. When someone criticizes your ambition, maybe it's because they've given up on their own dreams. When someone mocks your appearance, maybe it's because they wrestle with their own self-image. You are not a mirror for their projections, yet if you're not careful, you'll start carrying their reflections as if they're your reality. The Stoics were masters of detachment, not because they didn't care about anything, but because they refused to let their inner state be controlled by forces outside of their will. Epictetus taught, "If anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, 'He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned only these.'" It's a lesson in humility and humor, reminding us that we all have flaws, but no single person's opinion can sum up the entirety of who we are. From a psychological perspective, this is about separating your identity from feedback. Feedback can be useful when it's constructive, but when it's unhelpful, malicious, or uninformed, it becomes noise. Neuroscience even shows that our brains process social rejection in similar ways to physical pain. That's why words can feel like they hurt. But pain isn't always a reliable signal of truth. It's simply a signal that something has touched us deeply. The challenge is deciding whether that something deserves to stay with us or be released. If your sense of worth rises and falls with every compliment or criticism, you'll spend your life riding an emotional roller coaster you can't control. One day you'll feel invincible because someone praised you. The next, you'll feel small because someone criticized you. The Stoics sought a steadier ground, a sense of self that remains the same whether people cheer or jeer. This isn't about ignoring all opinions. The Stoics didn't shut themselves off from feedback. They listened, but they filtered. If someone you trust offers you criticism, consider it carefully, but measure it against your own principles and the reality of who you are. The words of those who love you, respect you, and know you well carry a different weight than the words of someone who barely knows your story. The key is to decide who gets a voice in shaping your self-perception. Think of your mind like a house. You wouldn't leave the front door wide open for anyone to walk in and rearrange your furniture. In the same way, you shouldn't leave your identity open for anyone to redefine with a careless comment. The people who lash out the most are often the ones struggling the most. Their words are shaped by their wounds, and if you absorb them unfiltered, you're letting their pain become your burden. Imagine someone handing you a heavy box that isn't yours to carry. You can choose to take it, or you can choose to set it down. The pause between hearing someone's opinion and deciding whether to accept it is where your power lies. Even in modern psychology, there's an understanding that our self-worth must be intrinsic, not extrinsic. External validation feels good, but it's fleeting. Internal validation, the kind that comes from knowing your values, your intentions, and your effort, is unshakable. Aristotle's wisdom aligns here. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. When you truly know yourself, it's harder for someone else's words to uproot you. There's also the danger of chasing approval. If you spend your life trying to make sure nobody ever says anything bad about you, you'll end up diluting yourself to fit everyone's preferences. And in the process, you'll lose the very qualities that make you unique. We often forget that every opinion is just that, an opinion. It's not a divine decree. It's not an unshakable truth. It's one person's perspective at one point in time, shaped by their own experiences and biases. Jung observed, The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. The life choices that make you happy might horrify someone else, and vice versa. And that's okay. You weren't born to live up to their recipe. It's worth practicing the skill of reframing criticism. Instead of immediately taking it as an attack, ask yourself, is there something in here I can learn from? If yes, use it to grow. If no, discard it without bitterness. This keeps you in control. You become a filter, not a sponge. You decide what to let in and what to leave out. A practical exercise is to write down the values and principles that matter most to you. Integrity, kindness, courage, perseverance, whatever they are. When criticism comes, measure it against that list. If someone accuses you of being lazy, but you know you've been consistent and disciplined, you can dismiss the comment without it shaking you. If someone says you're selfish but you've acted with generosity, you can trust your own record over their perception. Over time, you'll notice a shift. The voices around you will still exist. Praise and criticism will still come, but neither will dictate your worth. Compliments won't inflate you, and insults won't deflate you. You'll walk on steady ground, no longer swayed by every passing opinion. This is the heart of Stoic strength. To remain the same in your self-respect, whether the crowd applauds or boos. To separate your worth from their words, and to remember that your life is your own to define. The next time someone's comment starts to echo in your mind, stop and ask yourself, does this define me, or does it define them? That single question can save you hours of unnecessary doubt and keep you anchored in the truth of who you are. Because in the end, the words that matter most are not the ones spoken about you. They're the ones you speak to yourself. Guard them carefully, make them truthful, and let them be the foundation you stand on when the noise of the world gets loud. That is how you keep your worth intact, no matter what anyone says. 6. Protect your energy with boundaries. There comes a point in life where you realize you can't say yes to everything without slowly saying no to yourself. Maybe you've felt it before, that quiet exhaustion that creeps in when you've been overextending, when you've been giving so much of your time and attention to others that there's nothing left for you. It starts subtly. You agree to help a colleague after hours. You say yes to another family obligation, even though you're already drained. You answer late-night messages because it'll only take a minute. But one day you wake up and notice that you've been running on empty for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to be rested, focused, and at peace. This is where boundaries come in, not as walls to keep people out, but as doors you choose when to open and when to close. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology put a name to it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If you constantly fill your mind with other people's problems, demands, and noise, your inner world takes on their color, chaotic, scattered, overwhelmed. Boundaries are how you protect that inner space. They're not about selfishness, they're about stewardship, guarding your time and energy so you can use them well. Think about your energy like a bank account. Every interaction, every favor, every project is a withdrawal. Without deposits, rest, solitude, meaningful activities, you go into emotional overdraft. And just like with money, running on a deficit eventually leads to collapse. The Stoics would say that your attention and energy are among your most precious possessions. Seneca warned, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy." Your time is the currency of your life. Spending it without care is the fastest route to burnout. Boundaries aren't just about saying no to others. They're also about saying yes to yourself. When you decline a commitment that drains you, you're making room for something that nourishes you. This is where clarity comes in. You can't protect your energy if you don't know what actually gives you energy and what depletes it. Take the time to notice which activities leave you feeling lighter and which leave you feeling heavy. Notice which relationships inspire you and which drain you. Jung reminded us, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." You can't become that person if you're constantly shaped by the demands and expectations of others. Communicating boundaries is often the hardest part, not because we don't know what they are, but because we fear how people will react. We fear being seen as difficult, selfish, or uncaring. But here's the truth. People who benefit from your lack of boundaries are the ones most likely to be upset when you set them. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign the boundary is necessary. The Stoics would remind us that other people's opinions are outside our control. Practical boundaries can take many forms. It might be turning off work notifications after a certain hour. It might be setting specific days for socializing and keeping others free for solitude. It might be limiting how often you interact with someone who drains you emotionally. These limits aren't barriers to connection. They're the conditions that make healthy connection possible. A relationship without boundaries is like a garden without fences. Everything gets trampled and nothing has the space to grow. One of the myths about boundaries is that they push people away. In reality, they bring the right people closer. Healthy people respect limits because they understand the need for them in their own lives. They know that when you say yes, it's genuine, not forced. And when you say no, it's not rejection, it's honesty. Jung said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." Boundaries ensure that the transformation is healthy rather than toxic. Without boundaries, burnout isn't just possible, it's inevitable. You start resenting the very people you once wanted to help. You lose patience, you lose focus, and you lose touch with yourself. The Stoics valued tranquility, and they understood that tranquility isn't something you stumble into, it's something you protect. Seneca wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere. If you try to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to yourself." Protecting your energy also means learning to sit with the discomfort of not pleasing everyone. It means accepting that some people will misunderstand you, and that's okay. The more you practice setting and keeping boundaries, the more you'll notice a shift, not just in your schedule, but in your mindset. You'll start to see your time and attention as sacred. You'll stop explaining yourself so much. You'll feel lighter, more in control, more focused. You'll realize that boundaries aren't about building walls. They're about building a life that you can actually enjoy living. And here's something the Stoics knew well. When you protect your energy, you can give more to the people and causes that matter. You can show up fully without resentment or exhaustion because you've cared for yourself first. It's like the wisdom we hear on airplanes: secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. Protecting your energy with boundaries is an act of self-respect. It's a declaration that your life is valuable, your time is limited, and your attention is precious. And when you live by that, you stop scattering yourself thin and start living with intention. You stop reacting to every knock at the door and start deciding who and what gets invited in. Because at the end of the day, your energy is your life force. If you give it away carelessly, you'll have nothing left for what truly matters. But if you guard it with wisdom and courage, you'll have the strength to live fully, love deeply, and face life with the calm resilience the Stoics admired. Boundaries aren't just a skill, they're a way of life. And the sooner you embrace them, the sooner you'll find the peace and clarity you've been craving. 7. Detach from the opinions of others. There's a certain kind of freedom most people never experience. The freedom of living without constantly looking over your shoulder to see what others think. From the moment we're young, we're taught to measure ourselves through the eyes of others, grades, likes, compliments, approval. And because of that conditioning, many people spend their entire lives chasing validation, always adjusting who they are to fit what someone else might approve of. It's exhausting, and worse, it's dangerous. When your sense of worth depends on the shifting opinions of others, you give away control over your own happiness. The Stoics understood this centuries ago. When you live for approval, you're not really living for yourself. You're living as a reflection of what you think others want to see. And the problem with that is obvious. Different people want different things. One person praises you for being bold, another criticizes you for being arrogant. One admires your independence, another calls it selfishness. If you try to please everyone, you'll twist yourself into a shape that doesn't even resemble who you really are. Psychology backs this up. Humans have a deep-seated need for social belonging, which served us well in the past when being part of a group meant survival. But in the modern world, this instinct can become a trap. Social media amplifies it. Suddenly, your worth feels like it's measured by hearts, shares, and views. You become more focused on looking good than being good, more invested in the appearance of success than the reality of it. There's an important mental shift that happens when you start filtering opinions. You stop taking them as truth and start seeing them as data points. An opinion is just a reflection of someone's personal beliefs, shaped by their own experiences, insecurities, and worldview. That means it's not an objective verdict on you. It's a statement about them. If someone calls you reckless for starting a business, maybe it's because they're risk-averse. If they call you too quiet at a party, maybe they're uncomfortable with silence. Their reaction says more about their comfort zones than your worth. There's no universal mold for how you should live, so why contort yourself into one? Detachment means accepting that you will be misunderstood, and that's not only inevitable, it's healthy. Here's the thing. People are going to form opinions whether you try to influence them or not. They'll judge based on incomplete information, misunderstandings, or even pure projection. You can spend your life trying to correct every false impression, or you can live in such a way that your own conscience is clear and let the rest go. Detaching from opinions also frees up your mental and emotional energy. When you're no longer anxiously replaying conversations, worrying about whether you came across the right way, or obsessing over someone's vague comment, you reclaim that energy for things that actually matter: your work, your relationships, your growth. A practical step toward detachment is to define your own measures of success. If your yardstick changes every time someone else speaks, you'll never feel stable. But if you know what matters to you, whether it's integrity, creativity, kindness, or mastery, you can measure yourself against that instead of against public perception. That's what the Stoics meant by living in accordance with virtue. Your sense of worth comes from living by your own principles, not from applause or criticism. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." Detachment from external opinion is about waking up, turning inward to ask, "Am I proud of how I'm living?" That's a far more important question than, "Do they approve of me?" Because even if they approve, their approval is fleeting. The crowd's favor is fickle. It can change with the weather. If you build your identity on it, you'll spend your life constantly rebuilding on shaky ground. This doesn't mean arrogance or stubbornness. It means balancing humility with self-trust. Listen to the right voices, but don't be enslaved by them. Learn from feedback, but don't let it rewrite your identity. Use criticism as a mirror, but not as a map. Detachment also strengthens your resilience. When your mood isn't at the mercy of external praise or blame, you become harder to shake. You stop chasing validation, which makes you less vulnerable to manipulation. People can no longer control you with the promise of approval or the threat of disapproval. You become, in the Stoic sense, truly free. Ultimately, detaching from the opinions of others is about reclaiming your authority over your own life. You decide what matters, you decide who you are, and you decide whose voices you allow into that inner circle of influence. The rest? Let it pass like wind through an open window, felt for a moment, then gone. Because in the end, living for someone else's approval is a form of self-abandonment. Living by your own principles is the deepest form of self-respect. 8. Respond with silence instead of anger. There's a unique kind of power in saying nothing. It's not the same as being passive, and it's not the same as avoiding conflict. It's a deliberate choice, a quiet act of strength that says, I will not give you control over my emotions. Most people underestimate silence because they confuse it with weakness. They think that if you don't argue back, you've lost. But the truth is, silence, when used with intention, can be one of the most effective ways to shut down negativity, protect your peace, and keep control of your own mind. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Sometimes the way you exercise that power is by refusing to hand it over through a heated, unproductive exchange. Think about the last time someone said something designed to provoke you. Maybe it was a sarcastic remark, a passive-aggressive jab, or a direct insult. Your natural impulse might have been to fire back instantly, to defend yourself, to prove them wrong, to match their tone with equal force. That's the reaction most people expect. In fact, it's the reaction they often want because it validates their effort to drag you into their emotional storm. But what happens when you don't play along? What happens when you simply look at them, pause, and say nothing? That's when the dynamic changes. By staying silent, you starve their negativity of the oxygen it needs to keep burning. Epictetus warned, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." When you react with immediate anger, you hand that person a piece of your freedom. You give them proof that their words or actions can dictate your emotional state. But when you choose silence, you take that power back. It's a way of saying, without words, you don't control me. This isn't about bottling up your feelings or pretending you're unaffected. It's about creating space between what they've done and how you choose to respond. In that space lies clarity, and in clarity lies strength. Carl Jung famously said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Your urge to speak in anger is often less about the other person and more about what their words trigger in you. Silence gives you the chance to notice that. It lets you ask, why does this bother me so much? Is it about them, or is it about something unresolved within me? Without that pause, you risk speaking from a place of raw emotion instead of reason, and once words are out, they can't be taken back. From a psychological standpoint, silence can be disarming. When someone is expecting a fight and they get calm stillness instead, they lose their footing. They can't feed off your reaction, and without that reaction, their aggression starts to lose momentum. It's like trying to punch smoke. There's nothing to hit, nothing solid to push against. This doesn't just protect you in the moment, it also changes the long-term dynamic in your relationships. People learn that provoking you is pointless because you won't give them the drama they're looking for. Of course, silence isn't about ignoring problems forever. There are times when you must speak up to defend your boundaries, to correct misinformation, or to stand up for what's right. But even then, the Stoic principle applies. You speak when calm, not when consumed by anger. One of the misconceptions about silence is that it means nothing is happening. In reality, silence is active. It's a decision to withhold energy from something unworthy of it. It's choosing to spend your mental resources on clarity rather than chaos. In relationships, whether personal or professional, that kind of restraint earns respect over time. People begin to understand that you don't get pulled into every conflict, that you don't respond to bait. And in a world where outrage is the default, that makes you stand out. Carl Jung also observed, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. Silence gives you the breathing room to face your own darkness before you project it outward. When someone provokes you, there's always a temptation to match their hostility, to throw your own shadows at them. But if you're aware of those shadows, you can choose not to unleash them. You can choose a different path, one that keeps you aligned with your values instead of being hijacked by your emotions. The beauty of responding with silence is that it works in almost every setting. In the workplace, it prevents you from saying something in frustration that you'll regret. In personal relationships, it signals that you value peace over pointless battles. In public or on social media, it keeps you from feeding cycles of negativity that never lead anywhere good. There's also a subtle form of influence that comes with silence. People remember when you could have lashed out but didn't. They notice the restraint, and it can shift the way they approach you in the future. Silence commands a certain respect because it's rare. Most people react instantly, emotionally. The one who pauses, who chooses their battles, who lets silence do the talking, that person becomes memorable. When you choose silence over anger, you also protect your health. Anger, when it spirals, floods your body with stress hormones. Your heart rate spikes, your muscles tighten, your mind narrows. This might have been useful in moments of physical danger thousands of years ago, but in everyday life, it often does more harm than good. Silence interrupts that stress response. It lets your body settle, your mind expand, and your perspective widen. Silence is not surrender. It's not weakness. It's choosing the higher ground, not because you can't fight, but because you know it's not worth fighting. It's the self-control that allows you to act with intention rather than impulse. And in a noisy world where everyone feels entitled to the last word, the person who can stand in calm, deliberate quiet often speaks the loudest of all. In the end, responding with silence instead of anger is about preserving your energy for the battles that matter, protecting your dignity in the face of provocation, and keeping your inner peace intact no matter what chaos swirls around you. That's not avoidance, that's mastery. And mastery, as the Stoics would say, is the truest form of strength. 9. Use gratitude as a reset button. It's remarkable how quickly our mood can shift when we focus on what's wrong. A small inconvenience, a careless comment, a change in plans, suddenly our attention narrows until all we can see is the frustration in front of us. That's when we start spiraling. We replay the moment, add new layers of irritation, and let the feeling grow larger than it needs to be. But there's a way to interrupt that cycle, to pull your mind back before it sinks too deep into negativity. Gratitude is that reset button. It's not about pretending nothing bad is happening, and it's not about blind optimism. It's about deliberately shifting your focus to what's still good, what's still working, and what's still worth appreciating. The Stoics practiced this daily, not because their lives were free from problems, but because they knew the mind can be trained to see beyond them. We often underestimate how powerful that shift in perspective can be. Anger thrives in a mind that's narrowed down to a single grievance. It feeds on the feeling that everything is wrong. But when you step back and start naming what's good, even in the middle of difficulty, you rob that anger of its oxygen. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He wasn't writing those words in a time of comfort. He was a ruler facing war, disease, and constant political pressure. If he could find space for gratitude under those conditions, then it's possible for us too. Carl Jung observed, "Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness." Gratitude doesn't erase difficulty, it gives context to it. It's a reminder that life is rarely all good or all bad. There's almost always something in the mix that's worth noticing, something that softens the weight of the moment. When you can hold both the challenge and the blessing in your mind at the same time, your emotions stop feeling so absolute. One of the simplest ways to use gratitude as a reset button is to start small. The mind often resists gratitude in moments of frustration because it feels fake to be thankful when you're upset. That's why starting with obvious, concrete things works. You might be stuck in traffic, but you're grateful you have a car. You might have had an argument with a friend, but you're grateful you have relationships that matter enough to fight for. These aren't meant to deny the problem. They're meant to remind you it's not the whole picture. Epictetus said, "He is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has." Gratitude also works because it pulls you into the present moment. Anger often lives in the past, replaying what just happened, or in the future, imagining what you'll say or do next. Gratitude is grounded in now. It asks, what right here in this moment is worth appreciating? That shift pulls your focus out of mental time travel and back into reality. And reality, more often than not, is more balanced than your thoughts are making it seem. Psychology supports this. Studies on gratitude show that regularly practicing it rewires the brain to be more attuned to positive experiences. This doesn't mean you'll stop noticing problems, but it does mean they won't dominate your mental space as much. Over time, you'll start finding gratitude more naturally, even in situations where it feels like there's little to be thankful for. Gratitude also disrupts the tendency to compare. A lot of anger, especially low-grade, lingering frustration, comes from the belief that someone else has it easier, better, or more than you do. When you're in that mindset, you're measuring your life against someone else's highlight reel. Gratitude flips the lens inward, reminding you of what's uniquely yours, what's valuable in your life regardless of what others have. Marcus Aurelius advised himself to confine yourself to the present. Gratitude is one of the most effective ways to do that. A useful practice when anger starts to take hold is the 3 and 3 method. You pause, take a breath, and name 3 things you're grateful for in that exact moment, no matter how small. Then, name 3 people you're grateful to have in your life. This does 2 things. It forces your mind to search for positives, and it brings relationships into focus, which often softens anger's edge. When you shift from "I'm furious" to "I'm lucky to have these people and these things," the intensity changes. The situation might still be frustrating, but it no longer owns you. The Stoics also used gratitude to prepare for adversity. They practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, imagining worst-case scenarios so they could appreciate what they currently had. Another reason gratitude is such a powerful reset is that it interrupts ego. Anger often grows when our ego feels bruised, when someone disrespects us, overlooks us, or challenges us. Gratitude humbles us, not in a way that diminishes, but in a way that grounds. It reminds us that much of what's good in our lives came from outside ourselves, through the help, kindness, or generosity of others. This humility makes it harder for anger to take root because you're no longer standing solely in self-interest. You're aware of connection and interdependence. Gratitude also builds emotional momentum. The more you practice it, the easier it becomes to access when you need it most. At first, it might feel forced. Naming things you're grateful for when you're upset might feel unnatural, but over time, it becomes reflexive. Your brain learns that when anger rises, gratitude is an option, and every time you choose it, you reinforce the pathway that makes it easier next time. The key is not to wait for big, life-changing events to feel gratitude. Practice it in the smallest things: a good meal, a kind word, a moment of quiet. The Stoics valued this because it made them less dependent on fortune. If you can be grateful for the ordinary, you're less shaken when the extraordinary is out of reach. In moments of conflict, gratitude can even shift the entire tone of a conversation. Instead of responding to criticism with defensiveness, you can acknowledge the value of the other person's perspective or express appreciation for their honesty. This doesn't mean you agree. It means you choose to connect rather than escalate. Gratitude softens the edges of interaction, making resolution more likely. When you make gratitude a habit, it becomes part of your identity. You stop seeing it as a tool you only pull out in tough moments and start seeing it as a way of living. You notice beauty where others overlook it. You find meaning in moments others dismiss, and when anger tries to take hold, it has to compete with a mind already trained to look for the good. In the end, using gratitude as a reset button is about reclaiming choice. You can let anger dictate your perspective, narrowing your vision until all you see is the problem. Or you can pause, shift your focus, and remind yourself of the things that are still worth appreciating. 10. Reframe criticism as a tool for growth. There's a certain sting that comes with criticism. It doesn't matter how old you are or how much experience you've gained. When someone points out your flaws, your first instinct might still be to defend yourself or shut down entirely. That's because criticism strikes at something deeply human: the desire to be seen as capable, competent, and worthy. And yet, if you step back from that initial reaction, you'll see that criticism, when handled wisely, can be one of the most powerful tools for personal growth you'll ever encounter. The Stoics knew this long before the concept was studied in psychology. Most people see criticism as an attack because they confuse it with judgment of their entire character. But in truth, feedback, whether gentle or blunt, is often about a single aspect of your actions, not the totality of who you are. Of course, not all criticism is created equal. Some of it is constructive, offered with the intention of helping you grow. Other times, it's malicious, rooted in envy, resentment, or misunderstanding. The Stoics would tell you that your job is to filter. One of the best ways to reframe criticism is to view it as raw material. Imagine it as clay. Sometimes it comes in a refined, workable form, and sometimes it's full of debris you have to sift through. Either way, if you're patient enough, you can shape something valuable out of it. Jung's perspective reinforces this. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Criticism, when examined, can bring unconscious habits or blind spots into the light. Once they're visible, you can work on them intentionally rather than being steered by them without realizing it. Psychology confirms that feedback is essential for learning. We're not wired to self-correct effectively in isolation. We need external mirrors to see what we can't see from the inside. But here's the catch. Just because someone hands you a mirror doesn't mean the reflection is accurate. That's why discernment is so important. When you receive criticism, ask yourself, does this person have the knowledge or experience to offer meaningful insight? Do they understand my intentions and context? Do they want me to succeed, or are they trying to tear me down? Sometimes the most valuable criticism comes from places you least expect. It might be blunt, poorly worded, or delivered in a heated moment, but inside it, there can still be a truth worth extracting. That said, it's equally important to protect yourself from feedback that serves no purpose but harm. Malicious criticism is easy to spot once you stop taking every word personally. It's vague, often attacking your character instead of your actions. It offers no clear suggestions for improvement, only judgment. When someone's feedback provokes a strong emotional reaction, it's worth asking yourself why. Is it because their words touched on something you already suspect might be true? Or is it because you've attached your self-worth too tightly to being flawless? Self-inquiry turns criticism from a wound into a doorway, an entry point for deeper understanding. Reframing criticism also builds resilience. The more you practice separating the useful from the useless, the less reactive you become. You learn to hold criticism in your hand without letting it pierce you, turning it over, examining it, and deciding for yourself what to keep. Over time, this makes you unshakable, not because you never hear negative things, but because you no longer let them define you. In practical terms, you can turn criticism into a tool for growth by following a simple process. Pause before reacting, evaluate the source, look for the lesson, and then decide what action, if any, to take. If the feedback is valid, act on it with gratitude. If it's not, release it without resentment. This way, every piece of criticism becomes either a gift or a discarded package. You never carry what you don't need. One of the most liberating parts of this mindset is that it removes the fear of being wrong. When you no longer see mistakes as proof of inadequacy, you stop avoiding situations where you might fail. And when you stop avoiding them, you start growing faster. Ultimately, reframing criticism as a tool for growth is about shifting from ego to curiosity. Instead of thinking, "How dare they say that about me?" you start thinking, "What can I learn from this?" That shift not only makes you more adaptable, it makes you more at peace. The Stoics sought tranquility not through avoiding challenges, but through meeting them with the right mindset. Criticism is one of those challenges, a small but potent test of your ability to remain steady, open, and committed to improvement. And when you approach it this way, you'll find that even the harshest words can be reshaped into something valuable. You'll stop fearing feedback because you'll know you have the power to decide what to do with it. In the end, that's what real growth looks like. Not perfection, but progress built on the courage to listen, learn, and keep moving forward. 11th, practice negative visualization. Most people start their day hoping for things to go smoothly. They want polite conversations, cooperative co-workers, no unexpected problems, and no one cutting them off in traffic. And when life doesn't deliver that perfect scenario, frustration sets in fast. But the Stoics would say that's exactly why so many people feel blindsided and angry, because they expect the world to behave perfectly. They didn't. They prepared for its chaos. Marcus Aurelius began his mornings by reminding himself, "Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness." That wasn't cynicism. It was strategy. He wasn't predicting the worst to feel miserable. He was preparing his mind so that when challenges came, he would be ready. This practice is what the Stoics called negative visualization, and it's a tool that can transform how you handle life's inevitable difficulties. The concept is simple but powerful. You deliberately imagine potential challenges, setbacks, or disrespect before they happen. You picture scenarios that could frustrate you: someone speaking rudely, plans falling apart, a deal going wrong, so that when reality throws one of them your way, it doesn't hit you like a surprise attack. Instead of reacting with shock or outrage, you think, "I knew this could happen. I'm ready." The modern mind often resists this idea, thinking it's pessimistic. But the Stoics saw it as mental armor. Negative visualization is exactly that, making the darkness conscious so it can't control you from the shadows. When you bring potential challenges into the light of your awareness, they stop being monsters in the closet and start being manageable realities. Psychology supports this approach as well. Athletes and performers use a version of negative visualization when they rehearse for things going wrong, visualizing bad weather, technical glitches, or unexpected mistakes, so they won't panic when the real thing happens. It's not about obsessing over worst-case scenarios, but about expanding your tolerance for discomfort. When you've seen a challenge in your mind before, it's less likely to overwhelm you in reality. The beauty of this practice is that it works in everyday life, not just in high-stakes situations. Imagine you have an important meeting tomorrow. Instead of hoping everyone will agree with you, visualize someone challenging your idea. Picture how you'll respond calmly, keeping your tone even, your points clear, and your body language open. Or maybe you have a long commute ahead. Visualize the traffic, the red lights, and the impatient drivers. See yourself breathing steadily, maybe listening to something you enjoy, instead of gripping the wheel in irritation. When those things actually happen, they'll feel familiar, and familiarity breeds calm. There's another advantage to negative visualization. It strengthens gratitude. The Stoics often paired the practice with imagining loss, not to dwell on it, but to increase appreciation for what they still had. Negative visualization also makes you more adaptable. If you expect life to follow your script, you'll always be thrown when it doesn't. But if you've mentally rehearsed a few alternate scenarios, you won't freeze when reality changes the plot. Think of it like carrying an umbrella on a cloudy day. It doesn't mean you want it to rain, but if it does, you're not soaked and miserable. The Stoics weren't obsessed with disaster. They were committed to readiness, and readiness brings peace. Some people confuse this practice with worry, but they're not the same. Worry is passive. It loops endlessly without resolution. Negative visualization is active. It has a purpose. You identify a possible challenge, consider how you'd handle it, and then move on. This is key. The Stoics didn't dwell in imagined problems. They visited them briefly to rehearse their response, then returned to the present moment. Epictetus said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." By changing your opinion, that challenges are expected rather than catastrophic, you strip them of much of their emotional weight. One way to implement this is to make it part of your morning routine. As you prepare for the day, take a minute to anticipate what might test your patience or resilience. Will you be dealing with someone who tends to interrupt? Imagine yourself letting them finish without irritation. Will you face a deadline? Picture unexpected delays and see yourself adjusting calmly. This isn't setting yourself up for negativity, it's setting yourself up for composure. Another version of the practice is to use it at the start of any important task or event. Before a presentation, imagine technical problems. Before a trip, imagine delays. Before a family gathering, imagine old tensions resurfacing. Then, imagine yourself responding in a way you'd be proud of, measured, thoughtful, and steady. That's the key. Negative visualization isn't just about picturing problems, it's about picturing your best self navigating them. And the more you practice it, the less you take challenges personally. When you've already pictured someone cutting in front of you in line, It's less likely to ignite rage when it happens. When you've already imagined a plan falling apart, you're quicker to adapt rather than sulk. Over time, this makes you more unshakable, not because life is easier, but because you've trained yourself not to be caught off guard. In the end, negative visualization is less about anticipating disaster and more about mastering your own expectations. It's about meeting reality as it is, not as you wish it would be, and staying steady no matter what comes. The Stoics didn't hope for a perfect world. They trained for the real one, and in doing so, they found a kind of peace most people never touch. That peace is available to you too. All it takes is a few moments each day to imagine the obstacles ahead and to picture yourself walking through them with your head high and your heart steady. 12. See insults as noise. It's amazing how quickly a single sentence from someone else can get under our skin. You could be having a perfectly normal day, and then someone throws out a sarcastic comment, a passive-aggressive jab, or a flat-out insult. Suddenly it's like they've hijacked your mind. You replay the words, wonder why they said them, maybe even imagine all the comebacks you could have used. But here's the truth the Stoics understood so well. Those words only have as much power as you choose to give them. From a psychological perspective, insults often function as projections. People see something in you, confidence, success, independence, that triggers something in them. Instead of addressing their own discomfort, they try to diminish you to level the playing field. It's easier to pull someone down than to climb yourself up. Understanding this doesn't make the insult pleasant, but it does make it easier to detach from it emotionally. The key is not to internalize what was never yours to carry. If you're unsure of your own worth, insults will find a place to land. But if you're rooted in your values, you'll see the remark for what it is, a fleeting opinion, not a statement of truth. The more you anchor yourself in self-knowledge, the more those words slide off like rain on glass. An insult lasts only seconds in reality, but in our minds we can carry it for hours, days, even years. We keep replaying it, adding new layers of meaning, building a whole story around it. But that's a choice. You can just as easily choose to let the moment end when the words end. The insult happened once. You don't have to live it 100 times over. This doesn't mean you have to tolerate abuse or pretend everything is fine when someone disrespects you. Boundaries still matter. But there's a difference between addressing behavior and letting it define your inner world. You can calmly tell someone their comment was inappropriate without letting it eat away at your peace. You can distance yourself from toxic people without carrying resentment like a second skin. The Stoics weren't passive. They were intentional. They focused on what they could control, and other people's opinions weren't on that list. One of the best ways to keep insults in perspective is to look at the source. Does this person live in a way you admire? Do they consistently show wisdom, integrity, and good judgment? If not, why would their opinion be the one you take to heart? Another tactic is to treat insults as a test of composure. Marcus Aurelius saw every challenge as a chance to practice virtue. Patience isn't developed in calm waters, it's developed in storms. Dignity isn't proven when people are kind, it's proven when they're not. When you receive an insult and choose not to react with equal negativity, you've demonstrated a level of self-control that can't be faked. You've shown that you value your peace more than you value having the last word. Carl Jung spoke about integrating the shadow parts of ourselves, acknowledging the less flattering aspects of our nature without letting them dominate us. Sometimes an insult stings because it hits a part of us we haven't fully accepted. Instead of immediately dismissing it, you can use it as a mirror. Ask yourself, is there something here I need to face? If the answer is yes, that's not weakness, it's growth. If the answer is no, then you can let it go without further thought. It's also worth remembering that silence can be the most powerful response. Seneca said, "The best cure for anger is delay." By refusing to react in the heat of the moment, you take away the other person's power. They might have wanted a fight, a display of defensiveness, or a sign they got to you. When they get none of that, the energy they were trying to stir up dies in the air. In this way, your calm becomes a kind of shield. Over time, if you practice seeing insults as noise, you'll notice something shift inside you. The words will still reach your ears, but they won't find a place to settle. You'll hear them, register them, and then they'll fade into the background. This doesn't make you detached from reality. It makes you free from being emotionally dragged around by every careless remark. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. You don't have to fight every insult to win. Sometimes victory is in refusing to enter the battle at all. An insult is just a sound. Its meaning only exists if you decide to accept it. So the next time someone throws words meant to wound, pause and remind yourself, this says more about them than it does about me. In that moment, you'll have done something the Stoics valued above all else. You'll have chosen peace over pettiness, strength over reaction, and wisdom over noise. 13. Pick your battles wisely. Life has a way of presenting us with endless invitations to fight. Someone makes a passive-aggressive remark. A stranger online posts something you disagree with. A colleague takes credit for an idea. A friend shares a belief that goes against everything you stand for. Each of these moments tempts you to jump in, to prove a point, to defend yourself, to set the record straight. But here's the thing, if you treat every disagreement, every slight, every perceived injustice as a battle that must be fought, you'll burn through your energy faster than anything else. You'll end up scattered, drained, and constantly on edge. The Stoics understood this all too well. When you don't choose your battles wisely, life starts to feel like one long argument, and the cost isn't just your time. It's your peace, your focus, your ability to move forward. Choosing your battles doesn't mean you're passive or indifferent. It means you're strategic. Think of your energy like currency. You wouldn't spend it carelessly on things that don't matter, so why spend your emotional resources that way? From a psychological perspective, constantly engaging in every conflict you encounter is a form of ego trap. You feel compelled to respond because your pride is on the line, because you can't bear the thought of losing or letting someone think they've bested you. Jung spoke to this when he said, "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." When you react to everything, you let circumstances and other people's behavior dictate your identity. When you choose your battles, you decide who you're going to be in each situation, and that's real power. Picking your battles wisely also means thinking about the long-term consequences. Will this matter in a year? Will engaging here help me or harm me? Will it change anything meaningful, or will it just escalate tension? The Stoics often reminded themselves of the brevity of life. There's a certain peace that comes when you stop trying to win every skirmish. You learn to distinguish between a battle of the ego and a battle of principle. The ego wants to be right, to have the last word, to be seen as superior. Principle, on the other hand, asks, does this issue matter to my integrity, my values, or the well-being of others? If the answer is no, then walking away isn't a loss. It's a win for your own clarity and stability. Sometimes letting something go feels unnatural, especially if you're used to defending yourself at every turn. But when you experience the calm that comes from not reacting, it becomes addictive in the best way. You start to realize that your silence doesn't mean agreement. It means control. It means you are deciding where your attention goes. And attention, like time, is one of the most valuable things you have. The practice also requires humility. Sometimes you'll realize that a battle you were ready to fight was actually just a distraction from something more important. Sometimes the best use of your energy is not to prove you're right, but to preserve your focus for something that truly matters. The Stoics knew that attention is the gateway to a good life. What you give it to grows, and what you starve eventually fades. When you start applying this principle in everyday life, you'll notice a shift. The petty arguments stop consuming you. You become less reactive, more deliberate. People might even accuse you of not caring enough about certain issues. But you'll know the truth. You care deeply, just not about everything. You've learned that caring for everything equally means diluting your care for the things that actually matter. And here's the paradox. When you stop scattering your energy on small battles, you actually have more strength for the big ones. The issues that truly align with your values, the fights that genuinely matter to you, those you can enter with full presence, clarity, and resilience. In the end, picking your battles wisely is about self-respect and self-mastery. It's about recognizing that your life is too short and your energy too precious to be spent on every provocation that crosses your path. It's about knowing when to speak, when to act, and when to simply let it go. The Stoics would call this wisdom. 14. Focus only on what you can control. One of the quickest ways to drain your energy and lose your peace is to obsess over things you have no control over. It's a trap almost everyone falls into at some point. You replay conversations in your head, wondering why someone said what they did. You try to predict how a situation will unfold, even though the outcome is in someone else's hands. You stress over the weather, over politics, over other people's decisions, as if sheer willpower or worry could bend reality to your liking. But the truth is, no amount of thinking, talking, or stressing changes what's outside your influence. The Stoics built their entire philosophy on this understanding. When you start to really grasp this, it's like someone handed you a master key to peace of mind. It doesn't mean you stop caring about what happens around you. It means you stop wasting your energy on things you can't shape directly. The challenge is that our minds are wired to fixate on the uncontrollable. If someone treats you unfairly, your instinct is to replay the scene, think about what you should have said, or imagine ways to make them see they were wrong. But none of that changes the fact that their behavior is theirs to own, not yours. The only part you control is how you respond, whether you meet them with patience, walk away, set a boundary, or choose silence. The Stoics didn't just accept this truth, they trained for it. They saw life as a constant practice of redirecting energy inward, toward the sphere where action actually matters. Seneca offered a warning that fits perfectly here. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. So much of our pain comes not from the events themselves, but from the way we interpret them, especially when we interpret them as things we should be able to control. If you drop the should, the pressure changes. You stop expecting the weather to be perfect, people to always be kind, or life to follow your timeline. You focus instead on your adaptability, your patience, and your preparation. From a psychological standpoint, this shift is powerful because it rewires your stress response. When your brain is constantly monitoring things you can't control, it stays in a state of low-grade anxiety. But when you consciously redirect your focus to your own actions, what can I do right now? How can I show up in this moment? You give your nervous system a sense of agency. Agency is calming, even if the situation around you stays messy. The Stoics also saw this practice as deeply freeing because it strips away the illusion that your happiness depends on external circumstances. This doesn't mean you become passive, quite the opposite. By letting go of what you can't control, you create more space and energy to fully commit to what you can. Your work, your health, your integrity, your relationships, all of these are within your reach. If you pour yourself into these, you'll see more tangible progress than if you scatter your focus on things you can only influence indirectly, if at all. Sometimes this focus requires conscious rituals. You might start your day by listing the things you'll inevitably face that are outside your control: traffic, other people's moods, market fluctuations, and mentally releasing them before they happen. This is a Stoic habit of premeditation, preparing yourself for reality so you're not shaken by it. At the same time, you identify where your effort can actually make a difference. Your attitude in traffic, your kindness regardless of someone else's tone, your decision-making under uncertainty. And here's the irony. Sometimes when you stop trying to control others, you influence them more. A calm, grounded presence can be more persuasive than any argument. People feel the difference between someone who's clinging and someone who's centered. There's also a long-term resilience that comes from this mindset. Life will always contain unpredictability, illness, loss, unexpected change. If you've practiced focusing only on what's within your reach, you'll meet those moments with steadier hands. You won't waste time railing against the parts you can't change. You'll move more quickly into action on the parts you can. And that shift can be the difference between feeling powerless and feeling prepared. At its core, focusing only on what you can control is about sovereignty. Your mind is your territory. Your actions are your responsibility. Everything else is outside the walls of your influence. You can observe it, interact with it, even be affected by it, but you don't rule it. And when you stop trying to rule what's not yours, you finally have the bandwidth to rule what is. That's where freedom lives. So the next time you feel your energy slipping into frustration over someone else's behavior, a decision you weren't part of, or an outcome you can't force, pause. Ask yourself, is this mine to control? If the answer is no, let it go, not out of apathy, but out of wisdom. The Stoics would say this is one of the most important choices you can make each day, because it determines whether your energy is spent building your life or lost trying to steer the wind. 15. Master the art of letting go. There's a saying that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's clever, yes, but it's also painfully true. You can carry a grudge for years, replaying the offense in your mind like a favorite scene in a film, and yet the person who wronged you might not even remember what happened. They've moved on with their life while you're still carrying the weight. That's the cruel thing about resentment. It punishes the one holding it far more than the one who caused it. The Stoics knew this well. Grudges have a way of disguising themselves as strength. We think that by holding on to the memory of what someone did, we're protecting ourselves, keeping our guard up. In reality, it's the opposite. From a psychological perspective, holding on to resentment keeps the nervous system in a low-level fight-or-flight state. Your body reacts to the memory of the offense almost as if it's happening again, flooding you with stress hormones. Over time, this wears you down physically as well as emotionally. Letting go allows your body to stand down, to shift back into a state where healing is possible. The Stoics practiced a mental exercise called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, not so they could stew in negativity, but so they could prepare their minds for the inevitability of human flaws. Letting go also means letting go of the need for closure. One of the reasons we hold on so tightly is because we're waiting for the other person to acknowledge the harm, apologize, or make things right. But the Stoics would tell you that depending on someone else for your peace is a dangerous game. The harm happened once, but every time you replay it, you suffer again. Letting go is like closing a door you keep wandering back through. It's deciding that the room behind it, filled with anger, hurt, and old wounds, has nothing left for you. You step into a different space, one where the past no longer dictates the temperature of your present. Letting go doesn't happen in a single grand gesture, it's often a process. At first, it might just mean catching yourself when your thoughts drift back to the offense and gently redirecting them. It might mean reframing the story so it no longer casts you solely as the victim, but as someone who has grown stronger through the experience. It might mean replacing thoughts of revenge with questions like, what can I do now to live well? Psychologically, letting go is tied to forgiveness, but it's not the same thing. Forgiveness is often thought of as a gift you give to the other person. Letting go is a gift you give yourself. You can release the hold an event has on you without ever telling the other person they're forgiven. This is important because it means you don't have to wait for perfect feelings before you start freeing yourself. The action of letting go can come before the feeling of lightness. People act according to their own set of values, wounds, and limitations. Sometimes, what feels like a deep betrayal to you might not even register to the other person as significant. This doesn't invalidate your feelings. It just shows that their internal world is different from yours. Understanding this difference can make it easier to release the idea that they should have known better. The Stoics would also remind you that life is short, and every moment spent in resentment is a moment stolen from your own happiness. Seneca said, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." Imagine how much mental space you'd reclaim if you let go of just one grudge. Imagine how much more energy you'd have for the things that truly matter, relationships that uplift you, work that fulfills you, experiences that bring joy. In practice, letting go can be as simple and as hard as a daily decision. I choose not to carry this today. You might have to make that decision over and over, some days more than once. But over time, the weight lessens. The memory might still exist, but it no longer has hooks in you. You remember it without the rush of anger or the ache of hurt. It becomes just another part of your story, not the defining chapter. Marcus Aurelius believed that the mind has the power to shape reality. The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. When you choose to let go, you're choosing thoughts that create space for happiness, not ones that crowd it out. And in doing so, you begin to see that the art of letting go is really the art of living free, not bound by the chains of the past, but walking forward with open hands and a lighter heart. In the end, mastering the art of letting go is about sovereignty over your own life. It's about deciding that your peace is too valuable to be held hostage by what someone else did or didn't do. Letting go isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live unchained. You deserve a life where the weight of yesterday no longer bends your back, where your energy is free to build the person you want to be today. That choice is yours, and it starts now. If this message spoke to you, I invite you to keep going. Watch one of the videos on your screen and take the next step in your journey toward calm, strength, and self-mastery. Thank you for being here and for being a part of Stoic Journal.